Hi, Jess. Okay, so the code commit section of the gig, I think, is complete. Obviously, we need to make sure that the dev can access the repo and that that is all working fine. But just for your benefit and just so you understand what's going on, let me run you through what I've done, and then you can have a better global picture of everything. Okay, the first thing I think that I just want to emphasize, really, even for the last video, is you need to remember that AWS has regions. So if you look up here, we're in the North Virginia region. That can sometimes accidentally be changed to something else, and then you won't see the right resources when you look for them. So always, if you're not seeing anything, if you're missing your Ripple store or your Ripple agent or something like that, please do check that that region up there is correct. So it's US East 1, North Virginia, and the code for it is US East 1. So that's just a kind of side issue, but just worth having that in your head all the time. It can be very confusing when you come into AWS and you start looking around, you can't see anything, and then you realize that you have the wrong region. Okay. So there are two things here that we need to consider for the Git repository. The first one is that it's stored in a service called code commit. And this is exactly like GitHub. It's exactly like Bitbucket or any of the other Git repositories. There's no difference whatsoever, really. Let me click on this and show you what's inside. It's pretty simple. There's a list of repositories, and there's one repository there at the moment which is called Ripple repository. We actually created it a while back. I don't think we did anything with it, but it was just there. Maybe you did that, I don't know. I can't remember doing it. Inside, at the moment, it just gives you some advice about how to connect. There are two different ways to connect with a Git repository. One is HTTPS, which is entirely secure. The other one is SSH, which is a different way of doing it. HTTPS is generally good enough for most people. It's very secure. It gets around quite a few of the problems that SSH has. SSH can be quite confusing, so HTTPS is a good one to use. Down here we've got a URL, which is the HTTPS URL for the Git repository, and this is a unique URL. Anybody can type it in, anybody can clone things, but they need to have the password and the username in order to do that. And the same if you wanted to write back to the repo, you would need the password and the username, so it should be entirely secure. Okay, password and the username I have sent you, and we'll go over that in a moment. And then down here, this is where you would see the different commits for the repository, and you may be able to click on the commit and explore that a bit more. Up at the left here, we'll be able to see who's pulled, who has downloaded the repository, the different commits. So there's no commits here. So that first one was files, actually. So that would show you the latest commit and the entire file structure. This one will show you who's pulled and when. This one will show you the commit. So that's the latest snapshot that has been uploaded. And then you have things called branches. Usually there's a master branch, but you can also develop features on other branches. And then you can switch branches, and you can merge one branch into the master branch. So that it's a good way of developing features without ruining your main code base, and without polluting it with development work. You can also tag your commits with different values, and I think there are some settings here. Yeah, just some ID settings and some Amazon resource number settings as well. Default branch, that will default to master, and so that is pretty much it. There are some other things down here to do with other AWS services, so we won't go into those at the moment, but those can build on top of the basic Git functionality. Okay, so that's the code commit side of things. It's actually pretty simple. You can look, pardon me, you can log into AWS and you can go and have a look at this, and you should be able to see how many lines of code have been changed, when the last commit was written, and as I said on the Fiverr message, it's a good way of keeping track of your developer and making sure that they're actually doing some work, because generally you can see how much the code has changed, even if it's just by a number of lines. So it's a good way of doing it. Okay, so that's code commit, but in order to get code commit working, what we've had to do is create a new user. So previously we just had a root user for AWS. We also need a new IAM user, and this is the username, repoman2, again in the North Virginia region. This number that comes after it, don't worry about that too much, that's your account number. So if I just show you quickly how I did that, so I went to IAM and created a new user. There's the user, repoman2. I go into it, and I've given it permissions, full IAM access, which it needs, and AWS code commit full access, which it also needs. And I had to do that because AWS won't allow you to get code commit credentials with the root user. So I had to create another user in order to get the code commit credentials. So you don't need to worry too much about that, but it's just to say that is another user there. If we want to look at the code commit credentials, they're actually in here, Security Credentials tab. And down here we have HTTPS Git credentials for AWS code commit, and we've created one already, and that's the username that I sent you, and that's what your dev will use. You can actually create another one on top of this. You can generate and store up to 2 sets of credentials. So you might want to give that to a different developer, and then you can see who is committing at what time, and so on. You can delete these, or you can make them inactive, or you can change the password. So if you were to fall out with your developer, you may wish to reset the password and change it to something else. And in that way, you have control over who can download the Git repository and who can upload changes to the Git repository. So that is it. There we go.